welcome to the Center of Addiction and Faith. So glad you could be here for this monthly webinar, this discussion. We are grateful that you chose to use your time this way to spend this time with us. I'm Pastor Ed Treat. I am the founder and director of the Center of Addiction and Faith. And there's somebody else in the waiting room. Katie, can you keep an eye on the waiting room for us?
Yep.
Thanks. Anyway, our mission here at the Center of Addiction and Faith is to address addiction in the greater community through faith communities. We're trying to teach them they can do a lot more than they're doing. We believe faith communities have a unique role to play in solving the addiction crisis. If we work together to solve this public health crisis, which is what it is, faith communities can help save lives, they can reduce crime, alleviate homelessness, lower incarceration rates, all while offering spiritual hope and healing. Today, we're thrilled to welcome our special guest, Caroline Beidler. She's the founder of the She Recovers Foundation. She started a ministry called the She Recovers Foundation, supporting women in recovery. She's the author of the Downstairs Church. If you haven't read that book, you really should get your hands on it. It's a great book for a congregation or faith community that's thinking about doing addiction awareness ministry. She talks about the connection or the disconnect between the upstairs and downstairs church, folks in recovery and 12-step meetings. She's here today to discuss her newly released book, You Are Not Your Trauma, Uproot Unhealthy Patterns, Heal the Family Tree. Basically, the holidays that we're coming into, dealing with the family drama that has created so much trauma in our lives. Families are always a challenge. It's true in my family, that's for sure. She's also bringing with her today her mother and co-author of her book, Diana Dalles. I think I have that pronunciation right. I didn't get to confirm that. Oh, good. Welcome, Diana. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So great to have both you and Caroline in. I'm sorry about the trouble you had getting in here. This topic of trauma couldn't be more timely. Trauma has become a key lens for understanding addiction, and it's also was the focus of our recent conference. This conversation feels like a natural continuation of our work. Before we begin, we'd love to know where you're from. If you would take a second and put your name and location in the chat page, then we can all see where each other's coming from today. If you have questions during the session, we'll have time for Q&A later in the session, so feel free to drop your questions in. I don't know if we have a Q&A button because we switched this over to a meeting rather than a webinar. So you'll be able to ask your questions by raising your hand later when we open it up for questions. But before we begin, let's take a moment to pause in silence, remembering those who suffer from addiction, and we'll follow that with a serenity prayer. So please take a deep breath and center yourselves, and let's pause for a moment. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Do we have a George yet? George, are you here? I don't see him, and I don't see him on the list. So I was going to introduce him, but I don't know that I can now. Let me just check my text messages real quick. Oh, he's sitting waiting for his email to show up with the link in it. Well, it was sent. Send it again.
We gotta love those technical difficulties, right?
Yes.
But thank you so much, Ed, for that introduction. And I'm just so excited to be here with my mom, Diana. We're going to have a great conversation today. And I also just want to clear up some confusion. Ed, I appreciate you sharing that I started She Recovers Foundation, but I did not do that.
Oh.
That I believe someone in the chat clarified that. I worked with them on an International Women's Day event.
I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just want to clarify and give credit where credit's due there. But I'm currently a consultant and technical writer. I work for federal agencies like SAMHSA and the Office of Recovery, doing writing for recovery resources. So that's kind of my day job behind some of the more forward-facing, public-facing writing and speaking and things like that. So, Mom, did you want to say a little bit more about yourself too before we get started, as we're waiting for someone to be joining?
No, you're muted, Diane. Diana, you're muted. You're still muted.
Yeah, you're on mute, Mom.
I'm wondering if this is a traumatic experience for anyone besides me.
Yeah, I think, Ed, I think there's a lot of technical difficulties, which is so interesting when that happens. And I think it's a good kind of segue into the challenges that we can face, you know, in the
Yeah.
holiday season, and just like the chaos and drama and stress. And Mom, just so you know, that little red microphone button, when you are able to be heard, that will not be there on the corner of your screen. So, Ed, are you okay if we just kind of jump into things?
Let's do that. I think we
All
can
right.
manage.
All right, wonderful. And I'm looking at the chat. It's so exciting to see so many folks here, and so many folks, you know, interested in this conversation. Speaking of the chat, I would love to have folks chime in the chat about maybe, you know, hey, are you showing up today concerned about the holidays? You know, are you showing up today because you're working with someone who may be struggling right now? I know, you know, I wanted to start off with a little bit of a confession. So I think for me, a lot of times around the holidays, I'm just reminded of so much of the struggle that so many of us in addiction and mental health recovery, trauma recovery can be going through. And I want to give you an example of that. A couple weeks ago, I met a woman. I love thrifting. I don't know if we have any like Goodwill fans, or in the South we have, it's called Carm. And so I love going to Carm, and I was going to Carm, and there were, you know, ambulances, police cars. The whole entire parking lot was just, it looked like a crime scene, you know, the yellow caution tape. And this woman was outside, she was loading donations for Carm, and you know, I walked up to her and I said, you know, what's happened? You know, I was just really surprised. I live in a small town and we don't usually see things like that. And, but I couldn't really tell what was happening. And you could see her eyes looked really sad, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, I think that someone overdosed here. You know, I think that someone overdosed here last night and passed away. And she was quiet for a minute. And then she said, you know, my son last Christmas overdosed and died in a parking lot. And I was just, oh, my heart just felt for her. And then she said, you know, what was so sad about his passing is that he was the middle of his brothers who also have passed away. And I kind of stopped and I said, what do you mean his brothers? And she said his other two brothers have also died from fentanyl overdose. And I just was so taken aback, you know, and hearing stories like that really, and for those of us who are working in the field and those of us who are maybe working in recovery ministry, hearing those stories it's just heart-wrenching. And I think around the holidays too, I'm always reminded that, you know, this balance of, yes, we have this opportunity to be grateful this week, and recognizing to be grateful in all circumstances, you know, to be grateful in all things, as it says in scripture, is hard work, especially when we've experienced traumas like this mother that I met, or like other things. If you read my mom and I's book, you know, we talk a little bit about our personal experiences there. So it's just, you know, I think the holidays can bring up different things and different pieces of life that is really important to consider. So all of that being said, you know, I don't want to kind of get off this or start this talk on a low note, but I think it's important to recognize the places that many of us are in this holiday season. And, you know, maybe your example isn't as tragic and really horrific as this woman that I met in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. But, you know, maybe what you're bringing into this week is, you know, drama with your family. Maybe you have a family member that you disagree with. Certainly we're not going to talk politics today, but maybe there's divisiveness or disunity in your family for whatever reason. Maybe it's one of your family members triggers that like child in you, like you revert back to your old ways, or maybe your eating disorder or alcoholism. Maybe some things are triggered over this period of time. So whatever the situation is, I think, my mom and I wanted to have this conversation because there are things that we can do, and there are ways that we can approach the season with God's help to be able to not only, and I know, I love to say this, not only survive, because I spent a lot of years just surviving the holidays, but really thriving through them and being an example, showing our loved ones, being that example, having that mind of Christ that we can bring into the holiday season. So I'm hoping, Mom, I'd love to welcome you into this conversation. If you've been able to come off of your mute button. No. Okay. Well,
But can I suggest, Diana, if you would leave and come back, it might correct itself. If you could leave the meeting and then come back in, we might be able to hear from you. And I find that works often.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ed. So that being
Yeah.
said, I'd love to open it up and have more of a discussion today as well. And we're not going to be presenting information, but really kind of guiding, and let's have a conversation about some of these topics. So I'd love to open it up. Ed, I'm not sure if our other host has joined, but would you be open to kind of facilitating?
Absolutely.
If you raise your
You bet.
hands? Okay,
Yes,
great.
there's a button at the bottom for reactions. It says react down at the bottom. If you click on that, there's a hand that you can put your hand up. Oh, there's a clapping hand. Where's the hand? Oh, raise hand. It's the second up from the bottom. It says raise hand. Well, like I just did. There's so many of us, we can't just all chime in. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, put your hand up. We'll call on you. Meanwhile, tell us what motivated the writing of the book. I mean, what made you think to write it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. My mom and I love to share this story. So it was, and I apologize, we're having some folks working in our house upstairs. So welcome to my unfinished basement.
Can't
So
hear a
you'll see
thing.
my dog, okay, behind me walking around, or maybe my cat will jump up. But so we started kind of thinking about this. I had finished my first book, Downstairs Church, and my mom, one day, I went to get my mail, and in my mailbox, I had this manila envelope that was about this thick from my mom. And I opened it up, and it was basically a manuscript, just lots of pages of her own writings, and including poetry and some other pieces. And after the publication of my first book, Downstairs Church, I was doing some writing. I didn't really know if I was going to do another book. I didn't really, it was just kind of this period, where I didn't feel a clear like direction from the Lord about that. And so I was just writing more personally, and just, and then I received this manuscript from my mom. And it was interesting. I looked back on what I had been working on, and it was all related to some of the trauma that I had experienced and healing from that. And so we started talking, and the more that I was looking at what she wrote, I went through it, and I started to kind of draw pieces out that kind of fit together with some of the ideas that I had. And so we decided to do this together. And I wish my mom could come off mute, because it's been a really interesting process. It's been almost like this, not being able to join a Zoom meeting, painful at times. And really, I don't know if anyone has the experience of writing a book with a loved one, but it is challenging at times, especially when we're talking about such deep issues, especially when I touch on my own trauma in the book as a child due to divorce, due
Right.
to some of those experiences that my mom was directly connected to. So we had a lot of opportunity to kind of revisit some of those things. And then, of course, our stories aren't in a bubble, right? They connect and interact with everyone in our life. And so I have to say, it's hard being a nonfiction writer sometimes, because, it's always being mindful of how what we're writing can impact someone else and those stories that aren't ours to share. And so there was a lot that has been removed from the book, and a lot that, will never see the light of day.
Right, right.
Because some of those decisions have to be made, and I've had people say, well, why didn't you write about this family member or this other side of the family? And, it's a really interesting question, but I felt like this book it was meant to be centered on my mom and I's experience. Now,
Mhm.
would we go back and do some things differently? Oh, I know, I don't know. Don't want to speak for my mom, but I definitely would. But I think, we were moved to write this because our stories hopefully have something to show someone else about what it means to not only live through hard things, but move through them and some of the ways that we can move through them.
Mm. That's I imagine that had to deepen your relationship with your mom. That had to be an incredible exercise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my mom and I have been through a lot together, more than we will ever write about. And I think, being able to do this together, it's been one of her dreams to publish a book. And so I think
Yeah.
being able to do that together, to have that, as something that we share, it's felt like a gift. It really has
Yeah.
felt like a gift. And if you have the book, I have a box right here, but it's beautiful. I mean, oh, there it is. It's just beautiful. Like the cover is soft and it's the
It
branches and
is.
the birds. It's so inviting. And I hope that, I hope you get a copy. And I always say this, my husband's like, you got to stop saying this and sell some books. But if you can't purchase a book for any reason or want to give one away, please direct message me or reach out. I'm always love to do that. But get a copy and, if not for you, for someone else, because it really is an invitation to go deeper into some healing. It isn't an easy read. I
Yeah.
don't know if anything I will ever write will be an easy read. But
Well, yeah, I
hopefully,
would say you write so beautifully. It wasn't hard to read. I mean, there were some hard things in it to read about, but
Mhm,
the writing is beautiful, very easy to read in
mhm,
that sense.
in that sense,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it
thank
is
you.
challenging in terms of facing your own stuff. I find that most people, when asked, will say, "Oh, I didn't have that much trauma," and I want to say, "Well, wait
Mhm,
a minute. You can't live life without having trauma. I mean, it's just part of life. I mean, just think about your birth, how traumatic that is. And that's just the start. So life begins with this huge trauma and goes from one trauma to the next. But
mhm,
if you have events that happen throughout your life that you remember that were, the fact that you remember them tells you there's some clue to the meaning of that event. And many of those
mhm,
events that we most remember are traumatic.
mhm.
And I imagine more came up for you as you went through this that you maybe didn't know about, because I think we tend to not minimize or think it wasn't really trauma, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and I kind of start the book a little bit early on sharing. I think for me, some of those things, in recovery, you may have heard the expression, it's like, an onion, we peel back the layers. I don't know, I'm just kind of tired of that vision
Yeah,
picture.
yeah.
But there's so much truth to that. And for me, I think I had about 5 years living in recovery, abstinence-based recovery. And it was like all of a sudden, boom. I don't know if God was
Yeah,
like, all right, you're ready to deal with some stuff now. My brain was kind of healing, or if it was
yeah.
like a combination of all of the above. But I had all of these experiences kind of flood my mind, and I was
Mm,
very overwhelmed with symptoms of what I would find out to be post-traumatic stress disorder and just symptoms of a lot of what I had experienced
yeah,
that were finally surfacing. And so, I really try to talk openly about it because I think a lot of times, especially family members too, sometimes can think that our affected family members, once we quit using substances, like we're good.
right.
But a lot of times it's a couple years after that we start to, at least, from my experience and what the research shows is like a lot of what we experience
Yeah,
starts to come out on a whole nother level that we need more support for.
yeah. Well,
I
and
think
for
I'm
me
he
too.
I
Yay,
I think I'm here. Am I, can you hear
Diana,
me?
yes. Let's get you on the
Okay.
screen. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, hey mom,
Okay.
welcome.
Thank you. My computer was totally frozen. It wouldn't do anything for a while.
Oh man.
So
So how'd you fix it? You just rebooted it or?
I just rebooted it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll usually work. Um, so I wanted to ask you a follow-up to what Caroline was saying was when we were talking about going back and going through this with you. That had to be challenging to talk through some of these things. Yeah, and
It was totally challenging. But Caroline and I have a really open relationship in that regard. First, I didn't know that things had happened to her that were in like her first book. I didn't understand what her life was like at that time. So for me, it was learning some different things about her. But we talked through everything. Um, and I must admit, writing the book has brought up a lot for me. So I've been healing on a much deeper level than I
yeah,
had before.
I imagine. Yeah. Yeah. So what was what was this experience like for you? I asked Caroline what it was like for her to go through this process. And you kind of just hit on that. So it's really kind of a redundant question.
It was difficult. I must admit, I couldn't read the whole thing. Um, well, let
Did
me
you guys
start.
pass it back and forth and key off of each other, or did you write separately and then bring it together? I mean, I just hard to imagine
Well,
how you would collaborate.
well, it was my journals that she took when I retired. I wrote what I thought was a book, and it was basically the trauma I had experienced, and it was in great detail. And at that one point, I sent my writings to Caroline, and she evidently didn't really understand what had happened to me either. So she took um, parts of my writings and just called and said, "Would you be okay if I put some of your writings into the book?"
Mm.
So that's how they got in the book. And I thought it was just going to be like sentences and things like that. I didn't
Right.
know it was going to be, big kind of episodes.
Chunks of
Um,
stories. Yeah.
so that's how we kind of wrote the book together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. We were talking about how there are layers of trauma. I'm discovering more all the time. I was just on a family cruise. We talk about family drama, trauma. I was on a family cruise. I went to Alaska with my siblings last September, and I was number six of eight children. And so I was sort of down the pecking order. And it was a very dysfunctional family, craziness. And during one of the dinners on the ship, my my brother pulled up an old photo of me as a child and started laughing, and he passed it around the table, and everybody laughed at this picture of me. And I had such a strong reaction to that. And I realized that how much I had gone through in terms of being made fun of as a child, being the youngest of eight in a dysfunctional family. I took a lot of heat, and it was in the form of teasing and belittling and shaming, and realized that I've got a bunch of trauma around that. So, and that's what happens when I go home for the holidays and I'm around my family, is I get triggered so easily. I always say when I get back from being with my family, as much as I love them, I need therapy.
I can relate to that. And can I ask you too, because I'm curious and I would love to kind of
Yeah.
move into this part of the conversation too. And what do you do in those situations? Because I think and a lot of the folks that I work with and support, have asked me that. So I feel triggered around the holidays, and I feel some of these things from childhood coming back, these traumas, or this family drama. So how can I deal with that in a healthy way? So I'm curious, how
Yeah.
did you deal with that when you had that picture being passed around and people were laughing at you? And
Yeah. Well, at the time, I didn't do anything because it struck me. It caught me by surprise, and I didn't
Mhm.
really know what to say. I just kind of played along. But then my brother noticed my reaction and just said, it was that?" And I said, "No, it wasn't okay." And so
Mhm.
later he came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." And I said, "Oh, I just stirred up some old feelings about being teased as a kid." And that was as far as that went. But I did end up going to my therapist with it and saying, I've got this trauma that I wasn't aware of before, and I need to explore it. So,
Mhm.
so I know that my addiction was I started using because of my dysfunctional family. I really believe that was why my motivation was to deal with the pain of that, and it was the trauma of it. And when I got sober, I worked at 12 steps, but I didn't have any tools to deal with the trauma. which is why I'm so excited about the work you're doing, because I think what happens is when we need some ways to move through our trauma, um, identifying it first of all, because I realize how much denial there is in myself around the traumas I've experienced, but just digging it up and then what to do with it. But
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you know, followed up with a mental health provider, or professional, which is, you know, always really important. I know I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I don't think she's on, Lindsay. But I reach out to her, you know, when I need to do that now, and at times I've had more regular mental health support. But one of the other things for me, and Mom, I'd love to hear from you too next, but for me, when I'm moving into the holiday season, and now that I have a family of my very own, which has been a huge answer to prayer, you know, we have created new traditions and sometimes choose to not travel, and do our own thing. And sure, there's a lot of drama because we have 6-year-old twins, but it's of a different sort and I enjoy it. I enjoy the mayhem and the chaos from them. But, you know, when I was struggling with going back to an environment that was really unhealthy for me over the holidays, on a different side of the family, you know, I really needed to get firm about what my boundaries were and what I could do and not do. And I think I remember the one particular holiday where I stayed for about an hour and then I just bolted. You know, I just made, you know, I said something, and, you know, I had to leave, whatever the reason I gave. Hopefully it wasn't a lie, but maybe I was being dishonest, and, you know, sorry about that, but I gave a reason and I got out of there. And I just remember on my way home that holiday, it was like, I don't have to do this. You know, I don't have to do this and continually to put myself in this situation. I can still love my family, and I would go back for other holidays. But I could set some boundaries around what's healthy for me. And so, you know, even certain family members, you know, now will I go back to a different state, drive, you know, hundreds of miles to go spend time to do this thing with these people that, you know, may not be the best or the healthiest. No, you know, I don't have to do that today. But when I do, and when I feel like I'm in emotionally, spiritually fit place to do that, a couple things have helped me kind of get through those times, along with leaving and not staying. But being of service, you know, and I know we talk a lot about this in recovery, but I have spent many a holiday at the kitchen sink, always reminded of that, you know, Brother Lawrence, little book, Practicing the Presence of God. If you've read that, little ditty from, you know, a long time ago.
Recording in progress.
I love that because it's just something small, a simple way that I can show up and be of service, and take action. You know, I can do the dishes. I don't have to engage with this drama. I don't have to engage with people who are drinking. I don't have to, you know, I can just show up. I can be of service. I can love my family, and then I can get out. So Mom, do you have any thoughts or like around that specifically too, of like ways that you've managed holidays? And I know you and I have had some pretty dramatic holidays over the years, especially during my active addiction.
Well,
Don't tell anyone. No.
There's a couple things that I'm kind of excited to try this holiday. One of them is my role in the family was I was the scapegoat and I was not listened to. I tried to get people to listen to me, but it's like everybody tried to basically shut me up because they didn't want to hear what I had to say. So these days, I'm trying to take more of a kind of a sit back and watch the dynamics kind of role. But I'm also like I've got sisters that talk about their job and how people at their work really like the work that they do and how their patients really praise them for what they're doing. And what I plan on doing when that happens, because that always touches something in me. It's like people don't know what I've done. You know, I haven't told them, but they won't listen anyway, is what I tell myself. So, what I plan on doing this year is when they start getting into that kind of stuff, I'm going to affirm myself internally. I'm going to say to myself, I had this wonderful job, and there's all these people told me that I did a really good job. So I'm going to just affirm myself when they start doing their thing. I don't have to say it out loud, but at least I hear myself. And that's really important to me to feel my worth myself, because I'm not going to get it from out there from my family. I have to give it to myself. So I'm going to try that this holiday.
Yeah, well, what you were just saying reminds me of in adult ACA, adult children of alcoholics. They teach people to become their own loving parent, and it sounded exactly like what you were doing there. It's just is to
Mhm.
remessage yourself and say, no, that's not true. Here's the truth, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
be compassionate with yourself. And I think that's the hard part for people. Well, I speak for myself, is getting triggered and having no idea what it was. Just having the emotions, but having no idea what triggered it. And so I think the challenge is to just to begin to watch for it, and pay attention to that, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the things I'm actually reading another book right now, which is really good. I don't know if y'all have heard about this. Of course, get our book first, but
Yes.
Jenny Allen wrote a book called Get Out of Your Head. And it's centered on that, idea of being able to renew our minds and also
Mm,
having a choice in what we think and kind of what we allow into our minds. And I talk a little bit about this in the book, but I had an internship at a VA hospital and during graduate school, and it was amazing experience. I just loved it. It was really, really hard. And one of the things I learned in some of the group facilitation they were training us on doing is this idea that, when thoughts come in, similar to what, Jenny Allen talks about in her book and what scripture talks about, like we can take those thoughts captive or, kind of and shift and reframe and not let in some of those thoughts. So I remember going back, into holiday gatherings. I have some issues with food, and that's a part of my story. We talk about that in the book too, as well. But, where even just having all of this food and all of this, having to go in and that just like triggered something in me that felt gross and wrong, but if I ate this food, then just all of that
yeah.
those lies that were coming in, so to be able to shift that, and
Yeah.
like you said, Ed, to be our own parent and be like, we're taking care of ourselves, we can eat healthy over the holidays, we don't have to
Yeah.
binge, but we also don't have to restrict or feel guilty or bad about what we're ingesting and giving to our bodies. We can take that thought captive and reframe it.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, thanks, Katie, for dropping the link there in the chat too for our book. But it's just so interesting that we do have so many tools, and certainly from scripture, that are able to kind of help us manage some of the things that we go into over the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the holidays are kind of a setup for the emotional roller coaster. I think
Mhm.
about Christmas and how we were raised to look forward to this day that was going to be it was going to really fix us, if we got all the right presents and whatnot. And it turns out it doesn't really work. And
Mm.
so you go from this hopefulness and then you come crashing down. I'm thinking as a child, I've grown up now, so I know better than I still fall into it a little bit, but it sets you up to have a lot of highs and lows. And if you add, your emotional issues on top of that, you can get whiplash from it.
Mhm.
It's dealing with
Mhm.
the feelings of it all.
Yeah, or like with the picture kind of triggering some things. How many things happen as a child
Yes.
that are kind of lodged somewhere? And so I remember
Yeah.
a couple even
Yeah.
Christmas lately with my kids where it's like, huh, I wonder why I all of a sudden got really upset or, on the
Right.
holidays and maybe something triggered in me from when I was a kid and feeling
Right.
disappointed or
Right.
feeling neglected or yeah.
Yeah, and I do think that's where a lot of it comes from is when we don't understand, when we do something that's a little bit out of character for ourselves. That's almost a clue, really, isn't it? Just to say that, that came out of a trigger of some kind. And so that's a place to begin exploring what was it that
Mhm.
made me react that way. I just, as you were sharing, Caroline, was thinking about, you were talking about food, and I thought, oh, that's right. My family does a lot, because of my father. He would do this to us, and so we did it to each other. But there was a lot of body shaming.
Mhm.
He was always finding fault with our appearance, and he could find the one thing, and he would point it out to you like you wanted to know, like somehow that he was doing you a service. But it just left you feeling demoralized. And so,
Mm.
and you didn't know why, but I don't know. I'm just that's
Mhm.
another example of how you just keep finding more and more things. But I now I've got something new to go to my therapist over. It's the body shaming that I experienced growing up. You're really going to eat that? Don't you think you've eaten enough? I think of that statement.
Mm.
You're going to
Yeah.
get fat. Like, oh,
Mhm.
okay. I guess I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
That was a big thing in our family too. It's like we had a lot of girls in our family, and our dad liked thin women, so we
Yeah,
all basically starved ourselves so that we would be thin.
yeah,
And I remember each holiday, I wanted to be the thinnest one there. So I would starve myself before the holidays came so that I would be the thinnest one, so that everybody could say, "Oh my gosh, you've lost weight." And that was a real high point. When someone said that to you, it's like, "Oh my gosh, I did the right
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I'm thin."
Well, and
It's
there's
been it's
probably an
been a
element of
long journey.
getting
Hmm.
dad's approval too through that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I think it takes
That's
a
what.
lot of courage. Sorry, Mom.
yeah, for sure it does.
Mhm.
I cut you
Yeah.
off there. You were going to say something, Mom?
No, I
Well, I just want to point out
it's
that Katie has put in the chat page a list of the ACEs questions. I don't know if you're all familiar with ACEs. Katie, do you want to say something about the ACEs? Otherwise, I could hit on it a little bit just to. Um, I
Sure.
think the ACEs were really helpful for me to begin discovering a lot of the trauma that I experienced because it puts a name on it. But these are the 10 questions you ask yourself. And if you answer yes to 4 or more, your chances of developing an adult issue, a health issue, or an emotional issue, or an addiction issue goes up by like 4,000%. It's really incredibly predictive.
Mm.
Um, but have a look at those questions and see if any of those fit you.
Mhm. Yeah, we touch a little bit on ACEs in the book too, but yeah, like you said,
Mhm.
it's just really phenomenal, and pretty amazing how those can predict some of the
Yeah.
things that happen to us later in life. And I think I may have tried to be a little funny in the book, which I try to be funny sometimes. I think sometimes
Yeah.
it lands, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm.
But adverse adult experiences too,
Yeah.
is definitely a thing. And I think sometimes that layer of what we experience as a child, and then it, kind of repeating those patterns or continuing to have some of those traumas. I
Mm.
know my mom and I, the book was a wonderful experience, but there was a lot of maybe some adverse adult experiences connected
Oh,
to
yeah.
what we, went through, before, during, and after, the release of that. And so, yeah, just recognizing, especially in the world we're in, let's turn on the
Yeah.
news or don't turn on the news.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
I think we're just confronted with so much stress and things
Yeah.
that can cause anxiety and our adult trauma.
Well, this recent election is an example. I think half the country's happy and half the country's uh, feeling a little
Mhm.
traumatized
Mm.
by such a change in things. Potential change, we don't know what it means. That's, I think, the scary part of it all is which we just don't know what it means for us. But
Mm.
it's a big change, and so I think that we just came through COVID. That certainly was an
Right.
adverse
Mhm.
adult experience, and this really, really divisive election. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
there's a lot of instability in the world. It's just a challenging time to be alive.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely is. And I think countering that too with, so what is the foundation that we're going to rest our
Yeah.
lives and our mental health and the health of our families and our service in the community? Like what in to the church, like what do we rest our sanity on, basically,
Right. Right. Right.
our well-being on?
Mhm.
I think it's, a lot of hard things going on right now. And I think my prayer is that it's also an opportunity for many people to maybe come to a new understanding about what that foundation, could be.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
hope to point people to that a bit in the book.
Yeah.
But, and I'd love to hear too in the chat, or feel free to, come off mute or raise your hand, folks, too, if you want to join the conversation. But, ways that we can find footing, ways that we can really feel connected and tethered, when maybe some of this drama in the world or in our families, all this is going on.
Yeah.
What works for you all?
Yeah. What about holiday trauma? I know I sort of referenced that earlier as we're set up for this holiday. But I just remember as a child putting so much hope on this day, and then um, I don't know if this is really merits major trauma, but it's still with me after all these years. Was there was a certain toy I wanted, and if I didn't get it, it was going to be the end of my world, and I didn't get it. And that's why I love this movie, The Christmas Story, the boy that
Oh,
wanted a
yeah.
BB gun, because that was totally me, and I was totally invested in this thing, and I didn't get it, and it seems like such a minor thing, but as a child, it was pretty major. And I watched all my siblings get the things they asked for, and so it was, it leaves you questioning. Doesn't God love me? Don't my parents love me? What did I do wrong? But it does it takes you down a little bit.
Mhm. Can I ask what toy that was, Ed, and have you since
Yes,
gotten yourself a toy?
it was the Rock'em Sock'em robots. If I
Mm.
got those, then that was going to make my life. I mean, that was it.
Have you
It was
gotten
gonna.
them?
I did subsequently got them. I still have the box from it from like 1967, something like that. There's a box in my basement that has Rock'em Sock'em robots on it, and it didn't fix me. And that was another trauma. It was after
Oh,
about an
no.
hour, I thought this is stupid.
Oh, no, you need to
Yeah.
like frame that box and
Yes.
put it somewhere. It's a good reminder that, no, yeah, I think that's a good thing to bring
I
up. Mhm.
we didn't have a whole lot of money for Christmas, so it's like we each got one gift.
Mhm.
And I had this kind of mistaken idea from when I was a child that the more you suffer, I don't know where I heard it, the higher you get in heaven. So one year I got this beautiful fairy doll that I wanted, and she had pink hair. She was gorgeous. And
Mhm.
my sister, who was able to manipulate me, wanted my doll. She wanted to trade my doll for something else that was used and something else that she had for a couple of years. So I traded, feeling that I was going to get higher in heaven because I had given up something that I really wanted. So I lived that with that for many years.
Yeah.
It's like you have to suffer. So
Yes.
so it's been hard kind of getting rid of that scenario in my
Right.
head.
Yeah. Because somehow you're entitled to it, right?
Yep,
Or it's
yep.
a gift.
hmm
Yeah. Sounds like a Minnesota thing, actually. We expect to suffer here.
I'm in
You could
Wisconsin,
just
so
move,
Oh,
yeah,
you
you
do
could
that
just
too?
move
You guys,
south.
yeah.
I
we
discovered
do
that. You
that
can,
too.
You did what, Caroline?
I said, you can just move south. I discovered that. It's great.
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. I'm
Hey, Katie, will you
discovering that.
take us off of the pen and let's open this up to folks for a wider conversation? I want to encourage people to share with us some of the feelings they had. Um, I think Katie mentioned she got a lump of coal in her stocking from her brother as a prank. Oh man, that's funny.
Oh,
So what kind of traumas do you what kind of family experiences have you guys had that make you uncomfortable during the holidays around your family? Anybody brave enough to share? Well, we can use this time to pray then. Come on, somebody's got an experience they can share with us that they've worked through. It doesn't have to be something that's really raw or something that you're still struggling with. Yeah, Katie.
This is a friend, just a reminder of how many folks have actually lost loved ones over the
Mhm.
holidays and just what
Mm.
that does to the holiday experience. His sister lost her son to an fentanyl overdose.
Mhm.
Probably a unknown that a laced situation. And then that was about 5 years ago on Thanksgiving, and I'm reminded of it every year for him. But just the unique experience of having to go through holidays, both missing someone that you've lost, but also who you may have lost on the holiday, and just
Yeah.
the extra pain.
Mhm. I had some of that myself. My sister died a week after Christmas during the Christmas break when I was 14 years old. She was sledding with her church group and hit a tree coming down a very steep hill and killed her instantly. And boy, was that devastating. Pretty traumatic. Yeah. And so for the subsequent Christmases, you have this ghost that follows you, and it hangs over your holidays, and it makes it, it makes them kind of feel dark because death became very real at that time. You realize how powerful it is.
The empty seat at the table, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
How does one go about uncovering their trauma? I'm sure there are many ways to do that. I don't know about how aggressively you need to go after it because it does kind of reveal itself. But I think having the conversation is a really good starting place because then you can begin to kind of set your radar up for what to look for, unhealthy comments and just family dynamics. We all play a role in our families. Diana, you mentioned being the scapegoat. That's kind of a traumatic role to play in a family where you just get blamed for everything and you get all the sins of the family cast on you, and you're the problem with this family.
I didn't really realize it until like a month ago. All I knew was that I kept apologizing throughout my life. I've apologized for all sorts of things that I didn't even know that I did. I'm sitting
Mm,
there apologizing for them. So I'm at this point, I'm really focusing on people blaming me for things. And what's helpful is opportunities do come up so that I can see my role in it, or I can watch it happening to myself.
yeah. Kay's here. She'd like to share. Kay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. 5 years ago, my oldest son died of pancreatic cancer,
Mm,
and he was just such a super guy. And 2 years ago, my oldest granddaughter decided that she was gonna just disconnect from the family and not speak to any of us. So that was devastating. She just yesterday she made an attempt to reconcile with her father, my son. And so I'm excited right now. That's the
mhm.
best gift that I've gotten all year, the reconciliation. But one of the things that we've done in terms of our loss as a family, we've just told stories. We remembered stories, and we've shared the stories with those that weren't born or don't remember
Yeah.
the loved ones. And I think our storytelling is one of the ways we celebrate their lives.
Mm.
So
I think that's,
good stories, not bad stories, good stories.
yes,
Yeah.
but just talking about it, which what we didn't do after my sister died, it just became taboo. We just didn't talk about her.
Mhm.
And I carried that around for 14 years before I finally grieved. And my therapist said, you've been carrying that around for 14 years. That's a lot of emotion to hold down inside of you. And he said, this has been driving your life. Unresolved trauma drives your life in directions you don't necessarily want to go.
Yeah.
And I just want to say too, Kay, I appreciate what you shared so much. And I'm so sorry about your son. Sounds like a wonderful person. And I love that you brought up the storytelling piece too, as just such a powerful way that we can keep that joy too alive. And I think it's so important to consider, when we're talking about these conversations, that on the other side of the trauma is just like the joy, the beautiful, amazing joy that our lives can bring, even though we've been through hard things. And I'm sure you have those experiences where you're telling stories about your son and everyone's laughing or everyone's lit up, you know, and just experiencing that together. And then the blessing of, you know, your granddaughter. I mean, what a, I'm sure, answer to prayer, and we'll see what happens for you. But I hope, you know, I hope that's the beginning of some true reconciliation. And so around the holidays, it can be hard, but then there's also these opportunities for reconnection and for joy, you know. And I talked about that, you know, when I had a hard time going back to a certain house for a lot of years. I have a lot of healed relationships too, that today, you know, they're not perfect, but I've been able to make amends and heal from some resentment and experience forgiveness. And that is just incredible. So on the other side of the trauma is the good stuff. You know, I don't know if we need one to get to the other. You know, I don't know. I have a lot of questions for God, but it's, you know, I've experienced both sides. So
Well, but this is the world God made, and so it's all part of it. Yeah. And I mean, in my faith tradition, we talk about how God meets us in our pain, and the long form of the Serenity Prayer says pain is a touchstone for. Oh, that's not the exact way I'm paraphrasing, but pain is the entryway into peace, and pain is an opportunity. If we don't avoid it, an opportunity to grow and deepen spiritually and personally. We have Phil who mentions, he says he can't talk aloud where he is at right now, but until his dad went into AA back when he was 15, December was always more stressful in the house. And if you grew up in a house with addiction, there was plenty of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And so many of us have experienced that kind of instability and unknowing what to expect, and having the expectation that things are going to be different because it's the holidays, and then they're not. It's good when we can.
Well, and when you're going through it, it's like, well, this is normal. This is what everybody's
Right.
going through, what you think is normal. It wasn't until I got to be well into my recovery that I went, my gosh, my childhood wasn't normal at all. Not that any childhood really is, but
Right.
mine was pretty bad. Oh, there's Katie put in a link for ACOA meetings, adult children of alcoholics. We host one here through the Center of Addiction and Faith on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, sorry, Central Time. And we talk about childhood experiences that brought us there. If you grew up in a dysfunctional alcoholic home, you have issues, and they shape how you are as an adult. And until you begin to uncover those things and deal with them, they continue to be a problem, a thorn. And most of the time, you don't even know what's doing it. But unresolved trauma, I'm thinking, is a huge issue. So timely of you, Caroline, to write this book. So I wish you all the best with it. Caroline's doing a 4-part book study in January based on this book with your mom. Your mom will be a part of that.
I'm hoping to
think
rope
so.
her in.
Yeah, and there's a registration site that Katie is going to put in the chat page, right, Katie? So there'll be a link there to register for that book study. And I think there's a study guide that goes with it, right, Caroline?
Yeah, there definitely is. So we can get that to folks who register. It's free. It's a great companion. It walks through some questions. We'll do a little bit of Bible study with it. I think it's going to be more focused on We talk about the two sides, but kind of what we can do to kind of get out of our trauma, and we introduce some rhythms that will hopefully move us in a direction towards healing from some things. So it'll be a discussion-based group, and I'm sure, a wonderful opportunity to join, hopefully my mom and I, both of us in the month of January, which is a really neat time to think about, a new year, doing some new things with our life, seeing what God will make new in us into a new year. So we hope that you join us for that.
Wonderful. Really appreciate you doing that. That's so great to do a book study with the author. It just is such an opportunity. So I'm putting links in for the there's a link for the registration for that, but I'm also putting links in where to get Caroline's book and the book study link in the chat page. So you want to grab those before the meeting's over, because then they disappear. And then a couple of announcements. We've already come to the end of our time. I'm amazed. I just looked down at the time and I went, oh my gosh, we have to wrap up. Feels like we're just getting warmed up here. We have, for those of you that have hard time during the holidays, we have our longest night service on Thursday, December 19th at 7 p.m. Central Time. It's a service of lament and hope for those who are finding the holidays difficult. If you know someone who's struggling with addiction or has lost a loved one due to addiction or other reasons, or lost anyone for any reason during the holidays and is mourning that loss, please share this with them. I'll put a link in for, it's Katie already put a link in. She's ahead of me. Thanks, Katie. So there's a place to register for that so we know who's coming. And then in January, we're going to host our webinar a little earlier than usual. It's usually at the end of the month, but we're going to do this toward the beginning of the month in January. I think it's the 8th of January. You'll watch for stuff in your email. But it's January has been, people are doing this thing called Dry January, and we've done a webinar on it before. And it's a month of taking a break from alcohol. And people talk about what a gift that is to do that. Not that easy for everyone. And so we're going to be talking about Dry January and how to sustain an alcohol-free lifestyle. And we have with us Rob Lee from Choose Your Horizon. He's going to talk about some of the tools that you can use to get you through 30 days of becoming alcohol-free, at least trying it out. A lot of people that do that for 30 days say they like it so much they want to stay free. Because I don't think we realize how much alcohol sucks out of us in terms of our health. It's a really strong drug, and it really does hard things to the body. Don't forget to download our free smartphone app, Center of Addiction and Faith. Go to your app store. It's free. It's got a ton of resources, videos, webinars like this one that are on there, tools for addiction ministry. It's chock full of amazing resources, and it's free. So once again, thank you, Caroline, for being here, and your mother, Diana. Thank you. God bless you this holiday season. Have a great Thanksgiving. And thank you for your commitment to this work. Caroline's she has another book called The Downstairs Church. I mentioned earlier, but that's another book worth getting. But she's on the same mission we are at the Center of Addiction and Faith, and that is getting people to wake up to the issues of addiction, trauma, and all the related matters. We're a country that's, I don't know, this is another webinar topic, but we're a country that is built on trauma. We have our history. I think about our family histories, but our national history is pretty traumatic. And a lot of what we're experiencing today comes out of that trauma. But that's another topic for another day. We'll deal with that another time. But happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And I invite you now to go in peace and continue to reach out to those who suffer. God be with you.